Let's get ready to rumble!
Hi YouTube boxing fans, this is Charlie with Boxing Focus and a bit of a talk about David Price specifically. I'll try not to say too much about Audley Harrison who Price just defeated, but I'm sure I will get drawn into it a little bit. So as you know, David Price flattened Audley Harrison in 82 seconds, I think. It was one-sided, it was brutal, but let's face it, it was no surprise. I will say that Audley Harrison looked in fantastic shape. It's the best shape I can remember him being in. I don't think that makes much of a difference. Some people are heralding David Price as the next coming in the heavyweight division, and I will concede. Yeah, he looks very, very promising. Obviously hits hard, but he's a very big guy and he moves very well for his size. He doesn't look like he's 6'8". He looks more like he's 6'1", 6'2", with the way he moves. Some people are making a huge deal about how hard he hits. He obviously, he's a big, strong, athletic guy with good coordination. Pound for pound, he looks like he's a solid puncher. And because he's so big, that makes him makes him pretty lethal. I was going to say devastating. I don't think he's going to turn out as devastating as people make out. Knocking out Audley Harrison. Let's consider who Audley Harrison is. Alright, he's always talked a big game, but this is a guy who was knocked out in one punch by Michael Sprott. If you look at Michael Sprott's record, there's only one credible, and when I say credible, I'm putting in quotation marks. There's only one credible knockout on his record, and that is Audley Harrison. Michael Sprott does not have a big punch, and he knocked Audley Harrison out cold in the third round of their first fight. So I think when you consider David Price knocking Audley Harrison out cold, you've got to consider who he's knocking out. People are saying, "Oh, yeah, he manhandled." Well, I think the way Steve Bunce put it in the commentary was he handled Audley Harrison like nobody else had, but that's not true. David Haye did exactly the same to Audley Harrison. He just spent 2 rounds looking at him first. It's not like there were any other punches thrown in that fight. As soon as David Haye threw the first meaningful punch, that fight was over, which was pretty much the same as David Price. But David Haye is a much smaller guy. He had to contend with Audley Harrison's reach. He had to be a little bit careful on the way in to not walk into a punch. Not that Audley ended up throwing any, but David Price was bigger than Audley Harrison. He did not have to close the distance. He just had to wait for an opening. And Audley Harrison has shocking defensive technique for a fighter. I mean, he kind of like bent down and held his hands out and just poked his chin in. We didn't poke it in the air, but he just poked it out and said, "Hit me." And David Price duly obliged. And then Audley Harrison has no survival instincts in a ring. He just kind of falls, staggers, whatever you want to call it. He just ambles backwards into the ropes and sticks his guard up. And then it's open season, as David Haye showed, as David Price showed. It's not like they were in any danger of walking into a shot, because Audley Harrison doesn't throw any. He's one of the few tigers that, when wounded and cornered, is completely non-dangerous. And I just don't think that you can read that much into David Price steamrolling Audley Harrison. But David Price is He's a talent. He's promising. There's potential there. He did a very good job on Sam Sexton, which I thought was a little bit more impressive because Sam Sexton is a pretty durable guy, and he knocked Sam Sexton silly. You compare how Sam Sexton reacted to Price to the fight that Sam Sexton had with Chisora, which was very competitive. The one against Price was again another one-sided contest, but again David Price had all the physical attributes. So after the fight, David Price calls out Tyson Fury. Well, I say David. It was more his manager, Mick Hennessy. Tyson Fury had some entertaining words of his own. It was all done in cross-channel on different broadcasts, but they asked him about it during, I think it was the James DeGale fight. They had a quick interview with Tyson Fury at ringside, and he had a few choice words that apparently he's in a bit of trouble for, which is all entertaining. But I was a little bit surprised at the general reaction, people's opinions on Price and Fury. I mean, people were saying, that Price will flatten Fury, and Tyson Fury, okay, he had a bit of an unimpressive performance against Big John McDermott. Sorry, I've got a cold. Struggling for words. Against Big John McDermott. Other than that, he's looked pretty good. I mean, I thought Tyson Fury has looked better in every fight other than the first McDermott fight and the Chisora fight, which he still came through both and won. I think he's just improved steadily, and he's looking like he's in a lot better shape. Looks like he's taking the sport seriously. And again, he's just pretty much dealt with everybody that's been put in front of him and won every fight except one fight, which would be the McDermott fight. He's won comfortably. And what people are not taking into account, well, there are a couple of things when they're considering Price and Fury and saying that it would be one-sided. Tyson Fury is the same size as David Price. He will be the first opponent David Price has been in with that probably has a bigger reach. Tyson Fury has a good, solid jab, and Tyson Fury hits hard as well. He's knocked out a lot of durable guys, just as impressively as David Price has. Possibly more so, given that the difference in physique. I mean, it's only recently that Tyson Fury has looked in any kind of serious condition. Yeah, when he was looking a bit flabby and wonky, he was still putting guys to sleep. And I think you have to consider Tyson Fury will most likely box as a southpaw, which will present another challenge. I think people are saying that Fury doesn't take a punch, which is just nonsense. I think he hangs his chin out a little bit and he walks onto a few shots, but I don't think he's ever looked like he's been stunned a couple of times. Let's put it that way. But I think that would be a good fight, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Tyson Fury cause an upset, because I think he hits pretty hard, and of the two boxers, there's only one of them that got knocked out, and I mean properly knocked out in the amateurs, and that was David Price. So with a head guard and bigger gloves, 14 ounces, I think David Price got put on his backside and stopped. So I think there's going to be a few people in for a big surprise there, just because David Price is walking through guys that are smaller than him, or basically frauds in the case of Audley Harrison. I think we need to see him in with a live opponent before we really cast a proper judgment. You know, there's one thing knocking out Sam Sexton and Audley Harrison. There's another thing knocking out a durable guy like Chisora or 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 being in there with a Klitschko, who you know I think would hit just as hard as David Price does, or being in there with someone like Tyson Fury, another big prospect. You've got the American prospects as well, like Deontay Wilder and stuff. I don't think it's I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's far too early to say that David Price is the next big thing in boxing. He's just not been tested. And that can be a problem with guys as big as David Price. Um, so let's let's just say for myself personally, the jury's out on David Price at the moment. Not because I don't think he looks the part. He definitely looks the part. I love the fact that he comes in shape. I love that the way he boxes. I like the way he throws short, sharp shots. Doesn't reach. I like the way he puts punches together. His finish of Audley Harrison was as good as it could have been. Same with Sam Sexton. But you can't say if a guy is that good until he has been in with somebody that hits back, basically. And as we saw with Audley Harrison against David Hay, against David Price, Audley is not that guy. Audley Harrison is retiring, it seems. He's been a good salesman through the years. He's really sold his fights, but I think there's something more to his sales pitch than him just trying to make the fights popular. I think that the guy probably suffers from serious confidence issues. I think his sales pitches before the fights, trust me, I'm destined and all this kind of malarkey. I think he was saying it as much to convince himself as he was to convince the public that he ever stood a chance. There must have been something that happened fairly soon after a pro. I'm wondering if he got knocked out badly in sparring or something along those lines, when he was just becoming a pro or training for some of his early fights, because there seems to be no explanation for him taking on a succession of basically bums, bouncers, whatever. I don't want to be too disrespectful to guys, but guys without any real ability in a boxing ring, and he wasted his early promise by fighting nobodies, and he looked scared half the time. He was fighting guys that he had all the physical advantages over, yet he was fighting them like it was the opposite way around, and he ended up losing to the likes of Martin Rogan, who I love the way the attitude Martin Rogan brings, but the guy he just doesn't really have the talent, or the physical attributes. He worked his way to a solid win over Audley Harrison as Dominic Gwynn. Obviously, Sprott knocked Audley Harrison out. He has some of the physical attributes. I mean, he's not freakily big like Price and Fury, but he is a big guy. But he was never able to really engage and pull a trigger, and there must have been a reason for that, other than the fact that Sprott knocked him out early on. I think there's a few stories to be told yet. I think we're going to hear more about the Audley Harrison story, as much as none of us really want to hear it anymore. We've got Tyson. I remember for the David Hay fight when he was giving it all this mouth in the build-up, trying to convince people that he could beat David Hay, and there were people buying into it, and I was saying, no, this guy This guy, he just does not have it. That's all he's proved since he became a pro, is that he does not have it. He had it when he had a big head guard on and padded gloves, and was fighting guys that were smaller than him, which is his story, which is his amateur boxing career. Then he had it, but once once the stakes were upped, once really, really were, he was in the professional ranks, and didn't have that kind of protection, and had to fight longer, and was at risk. He just didn't have the mental strength, the fortitude to really compete. A knockout of Sprott, who is essentially about as far above journeyman status as it's possible to get without being a journeyman, was the highlight of his career. Possibly the knockout of Danny Williams, who was, let's face it, Danny Williams, another one of the fighters that I really love, but you have to be real. Sometimes he showed, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he was already becoming a bit of an unpredictable fighter at that point. It was massively on the slide, so those are the two highlights of Audley Harrison's career. So winning prize fighter, it's not that impressive. But he sold himself to the public. He made his money. Well done. He seems to take great pride in having done it his way, but wasted talent. That's what people say. I'm not so convinced. I don't think he ever really had it. Anyway, that's my rather pessimistic view of Audley Harrison. Fortunately, won't really have to talk about him again. David Price looks very promising, but I think people are jumping the gun a little bit on this one. If they do, I really hope they make David Price and Tyson Fury. I'd be a little bit surprised, because it's going to be a serious roadblock to whoever comes out second best in that fight. And I have to be honest, I would most likely pick Tyson Fury to win that fight. I'd like to see how David Price reacts to being hit, and hit pretty hard. And I think Tyson Fury has the length, and he's quite, he throws his punches quite quickly. He's got a very good jab. We've not really seen David Price's jab, especially against someone who would be physically competitive with him. So it's one thing jabbing somebody who's out of reach. It's like playing with a child, kind of holding their head. It's another thing with someone who you jab them and they're going to slip and knock you on. So I think I'm going over covered ground here, but I really hope that fight gets made. I think that would be a cracking start to 2013. So apologies for sounding a bit stuffy. I hope you enjoyed the pardon me. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. This is Charlie with Boxing Focus. Please leave comments. I'd love to hear from you and what you think. Thanks for listening.